Welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by Shankar IAS Academy for the date 30th of June 2020. The list of news articles along with the page numbers of 5 different editions is given here for your reference. Let us now begin our analysis. This lead editorial, written by Mr. Hamid Ansari, former Vice President of India, discusses how India should respond to the Israel's great annexation of Palestine areas in West Bank. So in this context, we'll see in brief about the Israel-Palestine conflict and then about the points discussed by the author of this editorial. The syllabus that is relevant to the analysis of this editorial is given here for your reference. See, there are reports that Israel is planning to annex Palestine areas in West Bank. Here, when we say annexation, it does not mean Israel is going to attack and forcibly establish control over new areas. It is just an administrative decision extending the sovereignty of Israel over areas that are already under Israel control. Precisely, annexation is the term that is applied when a state unilaterally proclaims its sovereignty over other territory. If you see, annexation is forbidden by international law. A recent example of annexation is the Russia's annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in the year 2014. So this decision of Israel to annex the Palestine areas is expected to come into force from tomorrow, that is 1st of July. Hence the article is titled as "In 24 Hours, Palestine Faces an Existential Threat." So before we shall understand what's going to happen after 24 hours, you need to have a brief idea about the Israel-Palestine dispute, which we are going to see now. See, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict dates back to the end of 19th century, primarily as a conflict over territory. Jews, after fleeing persecution in Europe, wanted to establish a national homeland in Arab and Muslim majority territory in the Ottoman and later British Empire, and this led to Arab-Israeli War of 1948. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the Holy Land was divided into 3 parts: the State of Israel, the West Bank, and then the Gaza Strip. And if you see, an early United Nations plan to give each group a part of the land failed, and Israel and the surrounding Arab nations fought several wars over the territory. If you see today's lines, they are largely reflecting the outcomes of 2 wars. One is the 1948 war and the another is the 1967 war. If you see, this 1967 war is particularly important for today's conflict since it left Israel in control of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which are 2 territories that are home to Palestinian populations. The West Bank is nominally controlled by the Palestinian Authority and it is under Israeli occupation, and Gaza is controlled by Hamas, which is an Islamist fundamentalist party. Since then, if you see, there are many incursions that has happened on both sides and it has resulted in huge killings. Currently, if you see, according to some sources, around 2 to 3 million Palestinian Arabs live in the West Bank under both limited self-rule as well as Israeli military rule. And if you see, the West Bank is also home to some 430,000 Israeli Jews who live in around 132 settlements built under Israeli's occupation. And many considered these Israeli settlements illegal under international law. Now if you see, Israel is planning to annex parts of West Bank into Israel. However, it is not clear which parts of West Bank will be annexed currently. So as we just said, West Bank includes Palestinians under limited self-rule, and then few Jewish settlements as well as strategic Jordan Valley that is bordering Jordan. If you see, this entire process is a part of Trump's peace plan or Middle East plan. This plan was announced in January by the President of United States, Donald Trump, and we have discussed in detail about this particular plan of the US President in our 29th Jan, the Hindu News Analysis. See, this plan proposes to establish a demilitarized Palestinian state on a patch of disjointed parts of the Palestinian territories. And this does not include occupied East Jerusalem, which the Palestinians claim as the capital of Palestine. As a result, Trump's Middle East plan has largely been rejected by Palestinian leaders along with few surrounding Arab states. But if you see, Israel has taken it as a show of support for its plans to seize and extend its sovereignty over the occupied land. So this move of Israel has now attracted criticism from almost across the world. On 24th June, if you see, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres told a virtual meeting of the United Nations Security Council that such annexation would be a most serious violation of international law. And he also asked the Israeli government to abandon its annexation plans, and he asked the Middle East Quartet to resume its mandated mediator role. Here, just have an idea about this Middle East Quartet. This quartet was set up in 2002 and it consists of United Nations, the European Union, the United States and Russia. The mandate of this Middle East Quartet is to help mediate Middle East peace negotiations and to support Palestinian economic development and institution building in preparation for eventual statehood. So you can see that the United Nations Secretary General has raised his concerns towards this move of Israel. And similarly, if you see this news article, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has described this annexation of occupied territory as a serious violation of the Charter of the United Nations and also the Geneva Convention. So this move of Israel has attracted criticism from almost across the world. Now, as you can see in this picture, the lands under Palestinian control are dispersed. After annexation of Israel settlements, what would be left of the West Bank would be the islands of certain disconnected land that is completely surrounded by Israel and with no territorial connection with the outside world. So, what would be the consequences of such a move? Would Palestinians living in annexed areas retain their private property, or would they be enshrined in a legal framework and be given residency as a category of subjects? Or would they be treated on par with Israeli Arabs of Palestinian origin, who together constitute about 20% of Israel's population? And above all, will it take away from the Palestinians the right to have their own state under the two-state solution? All these questions are left unanswered by Israel so far. So we need to wait and watch what the consequences of Israel's move would be. Now, in this context, the former vice president, who is the author of this editorial, has asked whether India supports this Israel's annexation plan, which is in contravention of international legality. Now, if you see, for years, India has had substantive relationship reaching strategic dimensions with Israel, which is mutually beneficial. So, India and Israel have collaborated across various sectors, including agriculture, and it is mutually beneficial for both the countries. But on the other hand, if you see, India's empathy with the Palestinian people and its principled support to their cause is something which is present even before India's own independence. And if you see on the global stage, many times we have supported the United Nations Security Council and the United Nations General Assembly resolutions in support of the Palestinians. So the author of this editorial concludes with the question, would India now support an annexation in contraventions of international legality and of our own commitments to Palestine? See, India is a rising superpower and it has to take many hard decisions in its course. But if you see, the aspirations of becoming the global superpower should not blind India's commitments and even India's values and ethos on which the Republic of India is built. So this is what the author of this editorial is trying to convey. This is all about the discussion of this editorial. To summarize, we have seen in brief about the Israel-Palestinian conflict and then about the recent decision of Israel to annex the Palestine areas, and then about the editorial where the author has discussed how India should respond to this move of Israel. See, in recent times, India-Israel relations are going in a very good pace. If you see, there have been questions in the subsequent years in your UPSC mains examination in connection with Israel. There was this question in 2018 mains which mentioned about India's relations with Israel, which has acquired a depth and diversity and which cannot be rolled back. This statement is in support of India-Israel relations. And if you see in previous year mains, that is 2019 mains, you had this question which was in connection with Israel. It asked to discuss US withdrawal and its accusation of UNESCO as being anti-Israel. So this Israel-Palestinian conflict and subsequent India-Israel and India-Palestinian relations is important from your mains exam perspective. So try to know about the events behind this conflict. Now have a look at this practice question. Now let us look at this op-ed article which discusses about the preconditions for effective governance in the school education sector before meeting the technology requirements and bringing in the non-state actors. In this context, this op-ed assesses the STARS program which is financially supported by the World Bank. So we'll be discussing about the preconditions which the authors of this op-ed article discuss in the background of this STARS program. The syllabus that is relevant to the analysis of this op-ed article is given here for your reference. First, let us see in brief about STARS project. See, STARS is the acronym for Strengthening Teaching, Learning and Results for States program. The World Bank reports that it is a new project to improve the quality and governance of school education in 6 Indian states. It focuses on addressing the learning outcome challenge and to help students to better prepare for the future jobs. And this is to be achieved through a series of reform initiatives which are given here, like focusing more directly on the delivery of education services at the state, district and sub-district levels. Then addressing demands from all the stakeholders, especially the parents, for greater accountability and inclusion. And then equipping the teachers to manage the transformation in education sector, and then investing more in developing India's human capital. So the focus will be on strengthening the foundational learning for children from classes 1 to 3. So for this purpose, the World Bank has approved a loan of $500 million recently on 24th of June 2020. Just note that the majority of the project cost will be borne by the center with contribution from the concerned state governments. See, the authors of this op-ed article state that the approach to be followed in STARS project is flawed, that is, it is a wrong approach. We will discuss the flaws reported by the authors in the last segment. As a result of the flawed approaches, the authors observed that the project in its current format is bound to fail in reforming the governance architecture. This is because the authors feel that there are some preconditions to be achieved in public education sector before adopting some proposed approaches in this STARS project. First is that a critical minimum level of resources is necessary in all the areas in the education sector. That is, the government administration must be equipped with adequate physical resource, financial resource and also human resources. In this, as a whole, India is in short of the critical minimum level. This means the focus should have been given to achieve this criterion. Secondly, the authors tell that the administrative or governance reforms must give greater discretion to the frontline bureaucracy. This is required in order to address the local issues and to bring innovations when required. So reforms must be at the local level so that it will facilitate utilization of better resources at the local level, and it will also be a part of greater decentralization in decision making. Thirdly, the authors tell that there needs to be trust building mechanisms within the administration, among the peers and across different levels within the administration. So such institutional arrangements should be geared to provide support and to improve the machinery while performing the usual monitoring and surveillance. So these are some of the preconditions which the authors feel that need to be achieved in public education sector before adopting some of the proposed approaches in the STARS project. Now let us see why the authors call the STARS approach to build state capacity is a flawed one. One is that it fails to address the basic capacity issues. Here, basic capacity refers to having all the adequate human resources in all capacity. That is, in teaching, in teacher training, in district institutes of education and training, in local level education offices, etc. The project should have focused on filling the unfilled vacancies in these institutional arrangements, and there has to be a substantial increase in trained manpower, support staff and other forms of institutional support. So this focus is actually absent in this project's approach. That is the reason the authors tell that the STARS approach is flawed in the present format. Next, the authors tell that decentralization is not given importance. Here, decentralization requires devolution of funds and devolution of real decision making power, as this allows accountability to the flow of people rather than to the supervising officers. So this will overall improve the efficiency in the system. Thirdly, the authors tell that more focus needs to be given to inject technology. But if you look at this STARS approach, it does not address most of the systemic or governance challenges, rather it simply bypasses them. The focus should have been given to promoting trust, that is promoting listening and collaborating across different levels within the administration to enhance the state capability. Lastly, the authors tell that the main lacuna is that the STARS project seeks to outsource basic governance functions by expanding private initiatives and by reducing government tasks. So you can see that it is going to go for outsourcing. And this is not going to make education more relevant to the local needs, or it will not promote people's participation as per the authors. because the government instruments are capable of governing these issues due to their past experience. The new private initiatives will not have such vast experiences and they do not have the grasp of socio-cultural realities for better service delivery. And moreover, the general perception is that the private will be motivated with business interests. So the authors are not really okay with outsourcing the basic governance function by expanding the private initiatives and by reducing the government tasks. So they stress that it is time to enhance the basic capability on the side of the government, as resources are inadequate in the context of governance in the school education sector. As a result of these issues, the authors mention that the present format of the STARS project is flawed. So these are some of the points that you can take from this editorial. To summarize, we have seen about the preconditions that have been discussed by the authors of this op-ed article for effective governance in the school education sector before meeting the technology requirements and bringing in the non-state actors. In this backdrop, this editorial discusses about the STARS program that is financially supported by the World Bank. Now have a look at this practice question. This news article is about the sanction given by the Expert Appraisal Committee of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change to upgrade the Uppalam port, which is located in Puducherry under Sagarmala project. In this context, you need to know about Sagarmala project from prelims perspective. So we'll see about this Sagarmala project and we will also see in brief about the Expert Appraisal Committee. The syllabus that is relevant to the analysis of this news article is given here for your reference. See, Sagarmala is port-led development program under the Ministry of Shipping. The concept of Sagarmala was approved by the Union Cabinet in the year 2015 and subsequently National Perspective Plan was released in the year 2016. See, this plan aims at comprehensive development of India's vast coastline and around 14,500 km of potentially navigable waterways and maritime sector. As we all know, ports play an important role in the overall economic development of India. Know that approximately 95% of India's merchandise trade by volume passes through seaports. But if you see, the operational efficiency of Indian ports still lag behind the global average and also some infrastructural challenges needs to be addressed. See, the vision of Sagarmala program is to reduce logistics cost for export, import and domestic trade with minimal infrastructure investment. This includes reducing cost of transporting domestic cargo through optimizing the modal mix, that is mix of different modes of transport, then lowering the logistics cost of bulk commodities by locating future industrial capacities near the coast, then improving export competitiveness by developing port proximate discrete manufacturing clusters, and finally optimizing time cost of EXIM container movement. Now let us see the components of Sagarmala program. The first component is port modernization and new port development. It involves debottlenecking and capacity expansion of existing ports and development of new greenfield ports. The second component is port connectivity enhancement. This involves enhancing the connectivity of the ports to the hinterland, that is to the inner areas. Then it also involves optimizing cost and time of cargo movement through multimodal logistics solution, including domestic waterways. And the next component is port-linked industrialization. This involves developing port-proximate industrial clusters and coastal economic zones in order to reduce the logistics cost and time of EXIM and domestic cargo. The next component is coastal community development. This focuses on promoting sustainable development of coastal communities. This will be done through skill development and livelihood generation activities, then fisheries development, coastal tourism, etc. And the final component is coastal shipping and inland waterways transport. This will provide impetus to move cargo through the sustainable and environment friendly coastal and inland waterways mode. So these are the 5 components of Sagarmala program. So these are the aspects that you need to know about this Sagarmala program from exam perspective. Now with this background information, let us look at this news article. The Port Department of Puducherry wants to undertake capital dredging and construction of barrier between the drainage channel and the navigation channel in Uppalam Port of Puducherry. So for this, the Expert Appraisal Committee has recommended the upgradation plan for Uppalam Port for environmental and CRZ clearance, that is Coastal Regulation Zone clearance. Also, the Expert Appraisal Committee has stipulated a number of conditions including compliance and continuous monitoring of marine ecology and marine biodiversity during the infrastructure activities. In this context, you need to know about Expert Appraisal Committee. Know that the Expert Appraisal Committees exist at the union level as well as at the state levels. The Expert Appraisal Committee at the union level comes under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. The purpose of this committee is to advise the government on environmental clearance of developmental projects. See, the Environmental Impact Assessment Notification of 2006 categorized all projects and activities into two categories. One is Category A and the next one is Category B. All the Category A projects, including expansion and modernization of existing projects, shall require prior environmental clearance from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change based on the recommendations of the Expert Appraisal Committee constituted by the central government. And all Category B projects, which includes expansion and modernization of the existing projects, will require prior environmental clearance from the state or the union territory Environment Impact Assessment Authority. And this state or union territory Environment Impact Assessment Authority shall give its decision based on the recommendations of the Expert Appraisal Committees that are formed at the respective states or union territories. So these are some of the aspects that you need to know about Expert Appraisal Committees from exam perspective. This is all about the discussion of this news article. To summarize, we have seen about the Sagarmala program of the central government and about the Expert Appraisal Committee from exam perspective. Now have a look at this practice question. This question, which is a pair-based question on social reform movements and its leaders, has been framed based on this news article. This news article tells that the central government has decided to revive Sri Narayana Guru spiritual circuit. Know that this comes under Swadesh Darshan scheme, which is a scheme under the Ministry of Tourism. The aim of the scheme is to develop theme-based tourist circuits. In this context, let us discuss in detail about one of the famous social reform movement in the state of Kerala, which was led by Sri Narayana Guru. Before that, first let us know the major types of social movements. They can be classified as redemptive or transformatory, then reformist and revolutionary. If you look at redemptive social movement, it aims to bring about a change in the personal consciousness and actions of its individual members. One example is the Ezhava movement in the state of Kerala, which was led by Sri Narayana Guru, which we will see in the later part of our discussion. Next, if you look at reformist social movements, they strive to change the existing social and political arrangements through gradual and incremental steps. If you look at the 1960s movement for the reorganization of the Indian states on the basis of language and even the right to information campaigns that happened in the past decade are all examples of reformist movements. Next, if you look at revolutionary social movements, these movements attempt to radically transform social relations, often by capturing state power. One very good example is the Bolshevik Revolution, which happened in Russia, which replaced the Tsar and created a communist state in Russia. So these are some of the major types of social movements that you need to know. Now coming to Ezhava movement and about Sri Narayana Guru, know that towards the end of 19th century, a number of socio-religious reform movements, which were also the earliest democratic mass movements in Kerala, took shape. One such important social reform movement was spearheaded by Sri Narayana Guru, which is the Ezhava movement. Note that Sri Narayana Guru is a great Hindu saint and a social reformer. He was born in the Ezhava community. See, this community had a status far below that of the Brahmin Nambudris, who resided in Kerala. So Sri Narayana Guru campaigned against the caste system and the Brahmin hegemony and the numerous social disabilities of the Ezhavas and other lower castes. Know that in 1903, the Sri Narayana Dharma Paripalana Yogam, which is a society best known as SNDP, came into being under the guidance of Sri Narayana Guru. This society propagated the moral teachings of Sri Narayana Guru. Know that Sri Narayana Guru's action was based on sublime humanism, and the social purpose soon became the philosophy of Hindu Reformation. This encompassed all the castes, including the Brahmins. So there was an impulse to change which affected every caste in the Hindu society as well as amongst the Christians and Muslims of Kerala. In this context, just have an idea that one of the most famous disciples of Sri Narayana Guru is Kumaran Asan. He is one of the most famous poets of Kerala, who is also a philosopher and a social reformer. Know that Sri Narayana Guru is well known for his doctrine, one caste, one religion and one God for mankind. Later, one of the rationalist followers of Sri Narayana Guru, Sahodaran Ayyappan, modified this doctrine into no caste, no religion and no God for mankind. So these are some of the facts that you need to know about Ezhava movement and about Sri Narayana Guru. With this information, let us look at this question. It is a pair-based question. 3 pairs are given and you need to choose those pair or pairs that are correct. This question has been inspired from this UPSC 2019 prelims question, where 3 organizations were given: All India Anti-Untouchability League, All India Kisan Sabha and Self-Respect Movement, and the respective leaders Mahatma Gandhi, Swami Sahajanand Saraswati and E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar. In this previous year prelims question, all the 3 pairs are correct. So from this you can tell that the first pair is correct, which is Self-Respect Movement, E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar. And the second pair is incorrect, because All India Kisan Sabha is a peasant movement which was started by Swami Sahajanand Saraswati. And Ezhava movement is concerned with Sri Narayana Guru. So here the correct answer is option C, 1 and 3 only. This question about Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, in short UN-CAT, has been framed based on this news article. This news article mentions that India is yet to ratify this United Nations Convention Against Torture. See, recently the Executive Committee of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative in India released a statement. The statement is in the context of the alleged custodial deaths of father and son in the state of Tamil Nadu, which has been in news in the recent days. The statement has urged the government of India to bring a draft law on torture, and it has also asked to ratify this UN Convention Against Torture. In this context, note that the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which has released the statement, is an international NGO which works in the area of human rights. It is an independent, non-profit, non-partisan international NGO. It was founded in 1987 in the backdrop of inadequate focus on human rights amongst the members of the Commonwealth Group. So it works for the practical realization of human rights throughout the Commonwealth. It overviews the human rights situation in countries of the Commonwealth, then their compliance with international treaty obligations, and it even monitors the performance of Commonwealth members of the United Nations Human Rights Council. So in this backdrop only, this Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative has urged the government of India to bring a draft law on torture, and it has also asked to ratify this UN Convention Against Torture. In short, UN-CAT. The full form of this convention is United Nations Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. It was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 10th December 1984 and it came into force in June 1987. This convention defines the term torture. The definition for torture is given here for your reference. Next, this convention asks the state parties to this convention to take effective legislative, administrative, judicial or other measures to prevent acts of torture in any territory under its jurisdiction. So once a country becomes a state party to this convention by ratification, then the country should take appropriate measures to prevent acts of torture in its territory. This means that a state party to the convention will have a specific legal framework against torture with provisions to prosecute and punish government officials for inflicting torture. Now let us see the status of this convention with reference to India. See, a country becomes a state party to this convention by ratifying or acceding to this treaty. Know that around 117 countries, including China and Pakistan, have become state parties. If you see, in case of India, it became signatory to this convention in the year 1997, but it has not ratified so far. So this is the status of this convention with reference to India. This is all about the discussion of this news article. Now look at this question. It is a 3-statement question and you need to choose those statement or statements which are correct. Look at the first statement. It tells that the UN Convention Against Torture asks each state party to ensure that all acts of torture are offences under its criminal law. Yes, this statement is correct. Now look at the second statement. It tells that this convention has an optional protocol against torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Yes, this statement is also correct. Article 4 of this convention provides for an optional protocol. Know that it was adopted in United Nations General Assembly in the year 2002 and it came into force in 2006. But if you see, India has neither signed nor ratified this optional protocol. Now look at the third statement. It tells that India is a state party to the convention. This statement is incorrect because we saw that a country becomes a state party to this convention only when it has ratified or acceded to this convention. But so far, if you see, India has only signed this convention, it has not yet ratified. So India is not a state party to this convention. From this you can tell that the first and the second statements are correct and the third statement is incorrect. So the correct answer to this question is option C, 1 and 2 only. Let us begin with practice questions discussion session. Look at this question. Which of the following groups is part of Palestine peace process? Here the correct answer is option C, United Nations, the European Union, the United States and Russia, which forms the Middle East Quartet, which we discussed during our news analysis. Here option A includes those countries which are a part of Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also called as Iran Nuclear Deal. And if you look at option B, the 6+2+1 group was recently in news, which is related to the Afghan peace process. So here the correct answer is option C. This question is about Sagarmala program. 3 statements are given and you need to choose those statements or statements which are incorrect. Look at the first statement. It tells that Sagarmala program is a port-led development program. Yes, this statement is correct. Now look at the second statement. It tells that the focus of this program is to develop new ports only and such ports-led industrialization. This statement is incorrect. There are 5 components of this program. The first and the foremost component is development of new ports as well as modernization of the existing ports. And one more component is port-led industrialization. So the second statement here is incorrect. Look at the third statement. It tells that Sagarmala program is implemented by Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This statement is also incorrect. It is implemented by the Ministry of Shipping. Now you need to choose those statement or statements which are incorrect. Always be careful, read the question again and try to choose the correct option. Here second and third statements are incorrect, so the correct answer is option C, 2 and 3 only. Now let us look at a mains question. Under General Studies paper 2, the question is, do you agree with the view that the state capability in delivering services in education or health is inadequate? Why? What are your suggestions to improve the present capacities? Answer this question in 250 words. It is a 15 marks question. This question has been framed based on the editorial that we discussed today on stars, where the authors discussed about some of the preconditions for effective governance in the education sector. So just go through the editorial and try to collect the relevant points and answer this question. Please post your answers in the comment section and we shall review your answers and give suitable suggestions and feedback within a reasonable time frame. With this, we come to the end of the analysis of all the news articles taken up for today's discussion and also the practice questions discussion session. If you like the video, press the like button, comment and share, and do subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel for latest videos and updates. Stay focused and motivated, friends. Thank you.